forest breathed around me, a living entity with secrets I could feel, but never hear. Autumn had painted everything in russet and gold, and the scent of decaying leaves rose from beneath my boots with each careful step. I'd always experienced the world differently, through vibrations beneath my feet, through the way light slanted between trees, through the subtle shifts in air pressure that warned of approaching storms or creatures. Being deaf in a world of werewolves was considered worse than being human. In our pack, the ability to hear a twig snap from half a mile away was survival. The ability to recognize the specific howl of your alpha was loyalty. The ability to respond to verbal commands in an instant was strength. I had none of these things. My grandmother had always told me, Everly, when the moon whispers to you in different ways, that's when you'll find your true path. I wore her silver pendant around my neck, a crescent moon wrapped around a small amber stone, the only thing I had left of her. She'd been the only one who never saw my deafness as a flaw, but as a different kind of power. The pack elders called it delusion. The pack alpha called it mercy to let me stay. Today was the autumn gathering, when unmated wolves from neighboring territories would come together, when potential mates would dance around ancient bonfires, when alliances would be formed and sometimes broken. I wasn't invited, of course. No alpha would want an omega who couldn't hear his call. No pack would value a wolf who navigated the world through scent and sight alone. Yet here I was, in the borderlands between territories, gathering the rare silver-veined mushrooms that only grew in the first frost. They were my offering, my way of making myself useful enough to keep. The basket hooked over my arm was nearly full when I felt it. A vibration that didn't match my footsteps, a disturbance in the air that made the fine hairs on my nape stand up. I turned slowly, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, but I knew I wasn't alone. Years of compensating for what I lacked had sharpened my other senses to near supernatural levels. Someone, or something, was watching me. The pendant grew warm against my skin, a sensation I'd felt only a handful of times in my 22 years. Grandmother had said it would warn me of danger, or destiny. That's when I saw him, a massive black wolf at the edge of the clearing, his eyes the color of winter ice, his stance predatory, yet somehow restrained. He was the largest wolf I'd ever seen, his shoulders easily reaching my chest if he stood beside me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I remained frozen, my fingers clutching the woven handle of my basket until my knuckles whitened. In our world, size signified rank, and this wolf, he could only be an alpha, a very powerful one. I lowered my gaze instinctively, a gesture of submission ingrained in all omegas from birth. The ground beneath my feet trembled slightly. He was approaching. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard I felt lightheaded. Would he see me as an intruder? Would he attack a defenseless omega gathering mushrooms in what might be his territory? When I dared to look up again, he was gone. Relief flooded me for only a moment before panic set in. Where had he disappeared to? My eyes darted frantically around the clearing, searching for any sign of movement. The attack came from behind, not from the wolf, but from something else. A blur of gray fur slammed into my back, sending me sprawling face first into the dirt. My basket flew from my grasp, mushrooms scattering across the forest floor. Sharp claws ripped through my jacket, tearing into the flesh beneath. The pain was immediate and searing. I couldn't hear my own scream, but I felt it tear from my throat. Rogues, wolves without packs, without honor, without restraint. This one was thin but strong, desperation making him dangerous. I tried to crawl away, fingers digging into soil and dead leaves, but a heavy paw pressed between my shoulder blades, pinning me down. I felt hot breath against the back of my neck. In wolf culture, this was the killing position. My vision blurred with tears as I thought of my little cabin on the outskirts of the packlands, of the herbal remedies I'd been perfecting all summer, of the book of pressed flowers I would never complete, of all the words I'd never said because no one ever really listened anyway. The weight on my back suddenly vanished. A thunderous impact shook the ground beside me. I rolled onto my side, clutching my bleeding shoulder, and what I saw stole what little breath I had left. The black wolf, the alpha, had the rogue pinned to the ground, massive jaws clamped around the smaller wolf's throat. There was no contest of strength here. The rogue thrashed helplessly, his movements growing weaker by the second. I couldn't hear the growls or whimpers, but I could see the raw power displayed in the rippling muscles beneath midnight fur, the absolute authority in the alpha's posture. He was saving me. This magnificent creature who owed me nothing had intervened to protect an Omega who wasn't even from his pack. When the rogue finally went limp, the alpha released him with what looked like disgust. He turned to me, those ice-blue eyes now assessing, calculating. I remained perfectly still, unsure what this rescue meant, what debt I now owed. Slowly, respecting the enormous power difference between us, I lowered my head in the deepest display of gratitude and submission our kind knew. When I looked up again, the alpha approached, his movements deliberate. He circled me once, scenting my wound, then stopped directly in front of me. He lowered his massive head, nudging the pendant that had slipped from beneath my torn clothing. Recognition flickered in those intelligent eyes, and something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or impossibly, recognition. Then, with one last penetrating look, he turned and loped into the forest, disappearing among the shadows and trees as if he'd never existed at all. I sat there for what felt like hours, clutching my wounded shoulder, replaying those moments in my mind. The pendant still felt warm against my skin. Something had changed in the fabric of my world, though I couldn't yet understand what. With shaking hands, I gathered the scattered mushrooms, salvaging what I could of my offering for the autumn gathering. As darkness began to fall, I made my way back toward the packlands, moving as quickly as my injury would allow. The lights of bonfires guided me home. The gathering had already begun, with wolves from at least 5 different territories mingling in our central clearing. Music would be playing. Though I could only imagine its rhythm, stories would be told, alliances negotiated, potential mates would be finding each other through the ancient dance of scent and instinct. I skirted the edges of the celebration, keeping to the shadows. My small cabin lay beyond the communal buildings, isolated by both design and circumstance. I had almost reached it when a firm hand gripped my uninjured shoulder, spinning me around. Sophia, the pack beta's daughter, stood there with irritation clear on her beautiful face. She spoke slowly, exaggerating her mouth movements so I could read her lips. "Where have you been? Alpha Gregory wants all pack members present. Even you." I pointed to my wounded shoulder, the torn jacket, the blood that had soaked through my clothing. Her eyes widened slightly before her expression hardened again. "What happened?" "Rogue attack," I signed, my fingers forming the quick gestures that few in our pack had bothered to learn. "In the borderlands," she sighed dramatically. "Get cleaned up. There's a visiting alpha who wants to meet everyone. Don't embarrass us." With that, she turned and stalked away, her irritation vibrating through the ground with each forceful step. I hurried to my cabin, wincing as I peeled off the ruined jacket and shirt beneath. The claw marks were deep but clean. The rogue had meant to kill, not infect. Small mercies. I cleansed the wounds with a tincture of my own making, gritting my teeth against the sting, then bound them with clean strips of linen. A fresh shirt, and my only other jacket completed my hasty preparations. The wounds would heal faster than a human's. But for now, they throbbed with each heartbeat, a painful reminder of how close I'd come to death. The pendant seemed to pulse against my skin as I approached the central clearing, almost as if warning me. I touched it for reassurance, my grandmother's words echoing in my memory. The moon sees what others cannot. Trust its light when darkness surrounds you. Wolves in both human and wolf form mingled around enormous bonfires. The alphas and highest-ranking betas occupied the center of the gathering, while omegas like myself remained at the periphery, serving drinks and food, always watchful for signals from our superiors. I took my place among the other omegas, accepting a tray of wine cups from the pack's head cook. No one mentioned my bandaged shoulder or the scent of blood that surely lingered despite my best efforts to clean myself. In a world of heightened senses, my disability made me practically invisible, a convenience to be used when needed, ignored when not. As I moved through the crowd, offering drinks, I scanned the gathering for unfamiliar faces. Visiting alphas always brought their highest-ranking pack members, displaying their strength and influence. I wondered which of these powerful wolves had requested to meet every member of our pack, even the lowest Omega. That's when I saw him. Standing beside our pack alpha, Gregory, was the tallest man I'd ever seen. His black hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and perfect symmetry. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart mid-beat. Ice blue. Penetrating. The same eyes that had stared into mine from the face of a massive black wolf just hours earlier in the forest. The visiting alpha, the wolf who had saved my life. And now, as those impossible eyes found mine across the crowded clearing, I realized with a cold shock of clarity that I stood in the presence of someone far more powerful than I had imagined. The pendant burned against my skin like a brand, and I knew with absolute certainty that my life would never be the same again. The weight of his gaze pinned me in place more effectively than any physical restraint. My hands trembled, wine cups clinking softly against each other on the tray I held. Around us, the celebration continued, wolves dancing, laughing, forming connections. But between us stretched a taut, invisible thread of recognition. He tilted his head slightly, nostrils flaring. Even from this distance, I knew he was catching my scent, confirming what his eyes had already told him. The wound on my shoulder throbbed in response, as if remembering the circumstances of our first meeting. Our pack alpha, Gregory, noticed the direction of the visitor's attention and frowned. He followed the line of sight directly to me, his expression darkening. Gregory had always made it clear that my presence was tolerated, not welcomed. A deaf Omega was an embarrassment, a weak link in a society that prized strength above all else. I lowered my gaze and turned away, continuing my duties with the wine tray. Yet I could feel those ice-blue eyes following me through the crowd, sending shivers across my skin that had nothing to do with the autumn chill. "You're bleeding through your bandage," signed Maya, another Omega who had taken the time to learn hand speech. Unlike most of our pack, Maya had never treated me as lesser. Her hands moved quickly, concern evident in her dark eyes. I glanced down at my shoulder where a small crimson stain had indeed begun to seep through my jacket. "I'm fine," I signed back, balancing the tray on my hip to free my hands. "What happened?" she asked, her gestures sharp with worry. "Rogue attack in the borderlands. I was saved by..." My hands faltered. How could I explain what had happened? That the imposing alpha now standing beside our pack leader had protected me in wolf form. That somehow, impossibly, he had recognized my grandmother's pendant. A heavy hand landed on my uninjured shoulder. I didn't need to hear the approaching footsteps to know who it was. Gregory's second-in-command, Nathaniel. His face was a mask of controlled irritation as he spoke, exaggerating his words so I could read them. "Alpha Gregory wants you. Now." Maya took the tray from my hands, her eyes wide with unspoken questions. I gave her a small, reassuring smile that I didn't feel, and followed Nathaniel through the crowd. Wolves parted before him, respect and fear mingling in their expressions. For me, they barely glanced aside, except to note the bloodstain on my jacket with mild curiosity. We approached the raised platform where Gregory and the visiting alpha stood with their respective inner circles. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat sending fresh pain through my injured shoulder. Nathaniel gestured for me to step up, then took his place beside Gregory, arms crossed over his chest in a defensive posture. Standing this close, the visiting alpha was even more intimidating. He towered over me, his broad shoulders and powerful frame radiating the kind of authority that came from more than just physical strength. Power clung to him like a second skin. He wore simple clothes, dark jeans and a charcoal Henley pushed up to reveal muscular forearms, but carried himself with the innate confidence of someone who had never needed finery to command respect. Gregory's mouth moved, and though I couldn't hear his words, years of reading micro-expressions told me he was making introductions, likely explaining my condition with the familiar blend of pity and dismissal I'd grown accustomed to. The visitor's eyes never left mine. Even as Gregory spoke, there was something unsettling in his steady gaze, not just the recognition of our earlier encounter, but something deeper, more assessing. I fought the urge to touch my grandmother's pendant, which seemed to burn hotter with each passing moment. Finally, the visitor spoke, his lips forming words I couldn't hear but could read with perfect clarity. "What is your name?" direct, commanding, a question that expected an immediate answer. "Everly," I signed, then realized he likely didn't understand. I touched my throat and shook my head, trying to indicate my inability to speak. To my surprise, his hands moved in fluid response, signing, "I am Dominic, Alpha of the Northern Territories." Shock rendered me momentarily immobile. An alpha who knew hand speech? It was unheard of. Alphas commanded with their voices, with their presence. They had no need for silent communication. "You sign?" My fingers formed the question before I could think better of it. A slight smile curved his lips. "I believe in understanding all languages of my realm." Gregory's expression soured further, clearly displeased by the exchange he couldn't understand. He stepped forward, inserting himself between us, his back to me in a clear dismissal. The message was unmistakable. I was no longer needed here. I backed away, bowing my head in the proper show of respect. But as I turned to leave, Dominic stepped around Gregory, his hand catching my wrist in a gentle but firm hold. The contact sent a jolt through my system, like static electricity but warmer, deeper. His touch resonated through me like a struck bell. "Your shoulder," he signed, releasing my wrist to free his hands. "How badly are you injured?" Gregory's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This was unprecedented. An alpha from another territory, showing concern for the lowest-ranking member of our pack, communicating in a way that excluded everyone else present. "I will heal," I signed back, acutely aware of the growing tension. "Thank you for saving me." Something flickered in those ice-blue eyes. Approval, perhaps. Or satisfaction that I had acknowledged what happened in the forest. Either way, it made my heart stutter in its rhythm. "Go tend to your wound properly," he commanded, his signs crisp and authoritative. "We will speak again." It wasn't a request. It was a promise. I nodded, then fled the platform, feeling the weight of dozens of curious stares. No one had ever seen me interact with an alpha before, much less hold the attention of one so powerful. Questions would come later, I knew, suspicions, perhaps even accusations. Maya found me at the edge of the gathering, her eyes wide with unspoken questions. "What was that about?" she signed frantically. "I don't know," I answered truthfully, my hands shaking slightly. "He's the wolf who saved me in the forest. He knows sign language." "The Alpha King knows sign?" Her expression bordered on disbelief. "The Alpha King saved you? Alpha King?" I signed, confused. Dominic had introduced himself as Alpha of the Northern Territories, not a king. Maya's eyes grew even wider. "You don't know who he is? Dominic Blackthorn is not just any Alpha. He's the Alpha King, ruler of the Council of 9 Territories. His pack is the oldest, the strongest. They say he can track a scent across oceans, that he's never lost a challenge, that he's—" Her hands faltered, then continued more slowly. "They say he's been searching for something for years. No one knows what." The pendant seemed to pulse against my skin, a silent warning or perhaps a confirmation. I thought of the way he'd nudged it in his wolf form, the flash of recognition in his eyes. "I need to change my bandage," I signed, suddenly desperate to escape the questions I couldn't answer. "I'll return soon." Maya nodded, though concern still shadowed her face. "Be careful, Everly. Attention from someone like him isn't always a blessing." I hurried to my cabin, mind whirling with too many thoughts to process. The Alpha King of the 9 Territories had saved my life. He knew sign language. He had recognized my grandmother's pendant. None of it made sense. Yet all of it felt significant, like puzzle pieces waiting to be assembled into a picture I couldn't yet imagine. My cabin was dark and cold when I entered, having been empty since before sunset. I lit the small oil lamp on my table, its warm glow chasing shadows into corners but not quite banishing them. As I removed my jacket and shirt to examine the wound, a soft vibration through the floorboards alerted me to someone's approach. Someone heavy, moving with purpose. I barely had time to pull my shirt back on before my door swung open. Dominic stood in the doorway, his imposing frame nearly filling it completely. Behind him, I could see 2 other wolves in human form, his guards presumably, though they remained outside while he entered uninvited. In the small confines of my cabin, his presence was overwhelming. He closed the door behind him, his eyes taking in the modest space. the herbs hanging from the ceiling beams, the small bed with its carefully patched quilt, the bookshelf filled with texts on healing and plant lore. "You live here alone?" he signed, his expression unreadable. I nodded, acutely aware of my partially dressed state and the vulnerability of being alone with an alpha of his status. Every instinct told me to be afraid, yet the fear I expected didn't materialize. Something about his presence felt safe, familiar, almost, though we'd met only twice. "Show me your wound," he commanded, gesturing to my shoulder. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain the small dignity of privacy, but defying an alpha's direct order wasn't something even I was foolish enough to attempt. I turned slightly, pulling aside the collar of my shirt to reveal the bandaged claw marks. He approached slowly, as if conscious of frightening me. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as they peeled back the blood-soaked bandage, revealing the 3 deep gashes beneath. His expression darkened, jaw tightening with what looked like anger. "The rogue who did this," he signed after stepping back, "was not acting alone." I blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" "Rogues are opportunists. They hunt the weak, the isolated. But they rarely venture so close to packlands during a gathering." His hands moved with precision, his gaze intense. This one smelled wrong. Altered. "Altered how?" I asked, unable to quell my curiosity despite the strangeness of the situation, as if his aggression had been heightened artificially, chemically. Dominic's hands paused, then formed a question that seemed to come from nowhere. "Your grandmother, she gave you that pendant?" My hand instinctively rose to touch the silver crescent. "Yes, before she died." "What did she tell you about it?" I hesitated, unsure why this powerful alpha would care about an old woman's words to her granddaughter, that it would protect me, that when the moon whispers in different ways, I'll find my true path. Something changed in his expression. A softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of his jaw. "Your grandmother's name was Elena, wasn't it?" The shock must have shown on my face because he nodded as if I'd confirmed his suspicion. "How could you possibly know that?" Instead of answering, he reached inside his shirt and withdrew a pendant of his own, identical to mine in every way, except that where mine held an amber stone, his contained a stone of deep sapphire blue. "Because," he signed, "Elena was my father's sister. Your grandmother was born a blackthorn of the Northern Pack. Which makes you, Everly, something I never expected to find in a remote southern territory." His hands formed the next words with deliberate emphasis. "You are my kin, my blood." The room seemed to tilt around me. I reached behind me for the edge of the table, steadying myself against a revelation that rewrote everything I thought I knew about myself. "That's not possible," I signed, my movements jerky with denial. "My grandmother was born here. She never spoke of northern connections. She fled the north during the Great War, when she was barely more than a child. She changed her name, hid her lineage." His expression grew grave. "She had good reason to hide, Everly. The same reason you've been kept isolated here. Your true nature disguised by your disability." "What are you talking about?" My hands shook so badly I could barely form the signs. "Your deafness is not a flaw, Everly. It's a shield." He stepped closer, his presence engulfing me like a physical force. "You don't hear with your ears because you were born to hear with something far more powerful, your soul. You're a moon speaker, the first to be born in 5 generations." The pendant burned against my skin, no longer a comforting warmth but a brand of truth I wasn't prepared to accept. Moon speakers were myths, stories told to pups, wolves born with the ability to communicate directly with the moon goddess, to interpret her will, to see paths hidden to others. "That's not true," I signed, though something deep inside me resonated with his words like a struck tuning fork. "Moon speakers aren't real. They are very real," he countered, "and very rare. So rare that many believe them extinct. So valuable that some would kill to possess one." His eyes darkened, and others would kill to ensure none ever exist again. The silence between us crackled with implications I couldn't fully grasp. Moon speaker. The words echoed in my mind, foreign yet somehow familiar, like a half-forgotten melody. If what Dominic claimed was true, my entire existence, the isolation, the pity, the sense of being fundamentally broken, had been built on a foundation of lies. "If what you say is true," I signed, my movements deliberate despite my internal turmoil, "why would my grandmother hide this? Why would she let me believe I was simply deaf?" Dominic's expression softened, compassion tempering the intensity of his gaze. "To protect you. The last known moon speaker was hunted down and killed 50 years ago. Some believe their power threatens the natural order, that no wolf should hear the goddess's voice so directly." "I don't hear any goddess," I countered, frustration building inside me. "I hear nothing." "Not with your ears," he signed, his movements patient. "The true voice of the moon cannot be heard through physical means. It speaks directly to the spirit. Your other senses compensated so strongly because they had to bridge the gap between worlds." He gestured to the pendant. "That stone, amber, is a conduit. It helps focus your abilities, though you've likely been using them instinctively all along." I thought of how I always seemed to know when storms were coming, how I could sense emotions in others that they never spoke aloud, how the forest sometimes seemed to communicate with me through subtle shifts in light and shadow. Things I'd attributed to heightened senses compensating for my deafness. "The rogue attack," I signed slowly, pieces falling into place. "You said he was altered. Someone sent him specifically to find me." Dominic nodded grimly. "I believe so. Someone who suspects what you are. Someone who wants to eliminate the threat you represent before you fully come into your power." "I'm not a threat," I signed, the absurdity of the situation hitting me. "I'm an Omega. I make herbal remedies and gather mushrooms. I've never challenged anyone. Your very existence challenges them," he replied, his signs sharp with conviction. "Moon speakers aren't bound by the traditional hierarchy. They serve the goddess directly. They can influence alphas, unite territories, alter the balance of power." He paused, his expression unreadable. "During the ancient times, it was moon speakers who chose the alpha king or queen. Their blessing legitimized rule." The implication staggered me. No wonder someone might see me as dangerous, even in my seemingly powerless state. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the weight of these revelations too heavy to bear standing. "Who would want me dead?" I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. "Who benefits from maintaining the current power structure?" Dominic countered. "Who fears change most deeply?" My thoughts immediately went to Gregory, our pack alpha. He had always treated me with barely concealed disdain, keeping me at the margins of pack life. Had that been strategic rather than simply cruel? A way to ensure I remained isolated, my potential influence contained. "I can't stay here," I signed, the realization dawning with cold clarity. "If what you're saying is true, I'm in danger." "Yes," Dominic agreed. "That's why I've come to take you north, to my territory, where I can protect you while you learn to harness your abilities." The offer should have seemed like salvation, yet caution held me back. "Why would you do this? Why risk yourself for someone you just met?" Something flashed in his eyes, a vulnerability at odds with his commanding presence. "Because I've been searching for a moon speaker my entire life. Because the northern territories need your guidance. Because we share blood." He hesitated, then added, "And because I made a promise to your grandmother." "You knew my grandmother?" The question formed before I could stop it, surprise overriding caution. "I met her only once when I was very young. She came to my father in secret, near the end of her life. She told him that she had hidden her granddaughter among the southern packs, that one day this child might be the last moon speaker." His expression grew distant, as if seeing across years. "She made my father promise that if signs of a moon speaker appeared, he would search for her descendant. My father passed that promise to me before he died." The pendant pulsed against my skin, warm and insistent. Was it merely the heat of my body, or something more significant? I touched it lightly, feeling its familiar contours beneath my fingertips. "How can I trust that what you're telling me is true?" I signed, voicing the doubt that lingered despite the resonance his words found within me. In answer, Dominic reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. He handed it to me carefully, as if passing something precious and fragile. I unfolded it to find a sketch. My grandmother's face, younger than I had ever known her, but unmistakable. Beside her stood a tall man with Dominic's ice-blue eyes, his arm around her shoulders in a gesture of familial affection. On the back, in my grandmother's elegant handwriting, Elena and Alaric Blackthorne, Northern Territory, 1975. My father kept this all his life, Dominic signed when I looked up at him, tears blurring my vision. Elena was his favorite sister. Losing her to the Southern Territories broke his heart. The door to my cabin suddenly vibrated with a forceful knock. Dominic tensed, immediately positioning himself between me and the entrance. He motioned for me to stay back as he approached the door, his posture shifting subtly into something more predatory. When he opened it, Nathaniel stood there, flanked by 2 of our pack's enforcers. His expression darkened as he took in the scene, me half-dressed with a bandaged shoulder, Dominic standing protectively nearby. Though I couldn't hear their exchange, the tension was visible in rigid postures and tight expressions. Nathaniel's gaze kept shifting to me, suspicion evident in his narrowed eyes. After a brief but clearly heated discussion, Dominic turned back to me. "Gregory requests your presence at the main hall. Immediately," he signed, his movements clipped with anger. "I've informed them I'll accompany you." Fear coiled in my stomach. Had Gregory somehow discovered what Dominic had revealed to me? Was this a trap? I quickly pulled on a clean shirt and jacket, wincing as the movement pulled at my wounds. "What will happen?" I signed to Dominic, keeping my hands low so Nathaniel couldn't see. "Nothing," he replied with absolute certainty. "You are under my protection now." The walk to the main hall felt like a procession to judgment. Wolves stopped their celebrations to watch us pass, curious eyes tracking our progress. The moon hung full and bright overhead, bathing everything in silver light that seemed to focus with unusual intensity on my grandmother's pendant. I resisted the urge to hide it beneath my clothing. The main hall was crowded with the highest-ranking wolves from both our pack and the visiting delegations. Gregory sat in his ceremonial chair, his expression thunderous. Beside him stood a woman I'd seen earlier among Dominic's entourage, tall, regal, with sharp features and calculating eyes. Something about her sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the autumn night. Gregory motioned for me to approach, pointedly ignoring Dominic, who nevertheless remained close behind me. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, solid and reassuring at my back. "Everly," Gregory mouthed, exaggerating as always when addressing me. "Lady Serena has brought serious accusations against you." He gestured to the woman beside him. "She claims you stole something from the Northern Territory many years ago, a family heirloom." My hands instinctively rose to the pendant at my throat. Lady Serena's eyes tracked the movement, a predatory smile curving her lips. "That's it," she mouthed, pointing. Though I couldn't hear her, the malice in her expression needed no translation. The Blackthorn moonstone, stolen by this girl's grandmother. Dominic stepped forward, his hand coming to rest protectively on my uninjured shoulder. The weight and warmth of it steadied me against the accusation. An argument erupted between Dominic and Serena, too rapid for me to follow by lip-reading alone. Gregory watched with calculating eyes, his gaze shifting between the pendant at my throat and the obvious protection Dominic offered me. Finally, Dominic turned to me, signing rapidly. "Serena is my father's cousin. She has coveted the alpha position since childhood. She claims the pendant is her birthright, that Elena stole it when she fled north." "Is that true?" I asked, confused by these conflicting narratives about my grandmother. "No," he signed emphatically. "The pendant chooses its bearer. It has always been passed from one moon speaker to the next. Elena didn't steal it. It chose her, just as it later chose you." Serena noticed our signed exchange, her face contorting with rage at being excluded. She stepped forward, reaching for my pendant with clawed fingers. Dominic moved with supernatural speed, catching her wrist before she could touch me. The tension in the room escalated instantly. Guards on both sides shifted their weight, ready to intervene. Gregory rose from his chair, his authority challenged by the conflict erupting before him. "Enough," he shouted, the force of it visible in the way everyone else flinched. He pointed at me, then at the pendant, then made a gesture I understood all too well. He wanted me to remove it and hand it over. A gesture of reasonableness, of compromise. Fear paralyzed me. The pendant had been my grandmother's final gift, my only connection to her. More than that, if Dominic was right, it was a conduit for abilities I was only beginning to understand. I looked to Dominic, uncertain. "Never remove it," he signed quickly. "It's bonded to you. Removing it now could be dangerous." "What's he telling you?" Gregory demanded, stepping closer to read our exchange. Before I could respond, a commotion at the hall's entrance drew everyone's attention. Maya burst in, her clothing torn, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. She staggered toward us, signing frantically, "Rogues! At least 20 of them, attacking the outer cabins. They're heading this way." Chaos erupted in the hall. Alphas barked orders to their packs. Wolves rushed to defend territories, alliances temporarily forgotten in the face of a common threat. Gregory began organizing our pack's defense, seemingly forgetting about me and the pendant in the immediate crisis. Serena, however, had not forgotten. As Dominic turned to speak with his guards, she lunged toward me again, this time with a small knife gleaming in her hand. I saw it coming an instant before it would have struck, my heightened senses warning me of the danger. I twisted aside, the blade slicing through my jacket sleeve instead of my throat. Dominic spun back at my movement, his eyes widening at the sight of the knife. In one fluid motion, he knocked Serena aside, his expression darkening with fury. "You dare attack a moon speaker in the middle of an emergency?" Serena's face twisted with hatred. "She is not a moon speaker. She's a fraud, just like her grandmother. The pendant is wasted on her. She can't even hear." "That's exactly why she can hear what matters," Dominic countered, his signs so fast I almost couldn't follow them. He turned to me, urgency in his eyes. "Everly, we need to leave now. The rogue attack is a diversion, meant to create chaos while they target you. But my pack..." I began to sign, thinking of Maya, of the other Omegas who had shown me kindness. "We'll be better protected once you're away from here." He interrupted. "You're the target. As long as you remain, everyone around you is in danger." The truth of his words struck me with painful clarity. My presence endangered everyone. The pack that had taken me in, however reluctantly, after my grandmother's death. I nodded once. Decision made. Dominic turned to his guards, issuing rapid orders I couldn't follow. One disappeared immediately while the other remained at Dominic's side, creating a protective barrier between us and Serena, who glared with undisguised malice. "We leave through the back," Dominic signed to me. "My wolves have secured a route to the northern border. From there, we travel to my territory." As we moved toward the rear exit, Gregory suddenly appeared in our path, his expression thunderous. "Where do you think you're taking her?" he demanded, the words clear on his lips. "To safety," Dominic replied, not bothering to sign for my benefit. "The attack is targeting her specifically. You know this, don't you, Gregory?" Something flickered across our pack alpha's face. Guilt, perhaps, or simply calculation. He stepped aside without further argument, his gaze never meeting mine. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity. Gregory had known. Perhaps not everything, but enough. Enough to keep me isolated, to treat me as lesser, to ensure I never discovered my true nature. As we slipped out into the night, the sounds of battle, inaudible to me but evident in the flashes of movement through windows and doorways, created a surreal backdrop to our escape. The pendant burned hot against my skin, almost painful in its intensity. "What's happening?" I signed to Dominic as we hurried through the shadows behind the communal buildings. "The pendant is responding to danger," he signed back, scanning our surroundings constantly. "It's trying to protect you, to awaken your abilities faster than would normally happen." "I don't know how to use these supposed abilities," I countered, fear and frustration building inside me. "I can't help anyone like this." Dominic's eyes met mine, their intensity undiminished even in the darkness. "You will learn," he signed with absolute conviction. "And when you do, Everly, you will change everything." The forest enveloped us, a living entity of shadow and silver moonlight. We moved swiftly, Dominic and his guard flanking me as we navigated through territory that grew increasingly unfamiliar. My wounds throbbed with each hurried step, but I pushed the pain aside, focusing instead on the path ahead and the revelation still settling like snow within my mind. Moonspeaker. The words continued to echo, foreign yet resonant. If Dominic spoke the truth, then everything I believed about myself had been carefully constructed fiction. I wasn't broken. I was rare. I wasn't weak. I was powerful enough to be feared. The thought was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. We paused at a small stream, the water gleaming like liquid mercury in the moonlight. Dominic's guard, a stocky man named Thorn with keen eyes and a perpetual vigilance, scouted ahead while Dominic turned to me. "How are you holding up?" he signed, his movements somehow both efficient and gentle. "I'm managing," I replied, though my shoulder burned and my legs trembled with exertion. "But I need answers. Real ones." He nodded, understanding in his ice-blue eyes. "We should be safe for a moment. Ask what you need to know. Where to begin?" The questions tumbled through my mind like autumn leaves in a gale. I settled on the most pressing. If I truly am this moon speaker, why can't I feel it? Why don't I know how to use these supposed abilities? Dominic's expression softened. "Most abilities manifest gradually, usually beginning at puberty. But yours were suppressed, partly by the trauma of your grandmother's death, partly by your belief in your own limitations." He gestured to the pendant. "The moonstone helps focus abilities that are already there, but dormant, like a lens focusing scattered light into a beam. And Serena? Why does she want the pendant so badly?" A shadow crossed his face. "Serena believes that possessing a moonstone will make her a moon speaker. She's wrong. The stone chooses its bearer, not the other way around. But her ambition blinds her to truth." He paused, weighing his next words carefully. "She wants to be Alpha Queen. In the old ways, only a moon speaker could sanctify such a position. The implications stunned me. So she wants to use the pendant to legitimize a claim to your throne?" "Yes. And she's not the only one with such ambitions. There are factions within the 9 territories who believe the old ways are merely superstition, that power should belong solely to those strong enough to take it." His signs became sharper, edged with anger. "They've systematically hunted moon speakers for generations, eliminating the one force that could challenge their authority." I absorbed this, a chill settling in my bones that had nothing to do with the night air. "And Gregory? My pack alpha? Was he part of this?" Dominic's expression hardened. "I believe he suspected what you were, but chose to keep you isolated and ignorant rather than killing you outright. Perhaps out of some lingering respect for your grandmother. Perhaps because having a potential moon speaker under his control, even one unaware of her power, might prove useful someday." The betrayal stung more than I expected. Though Gregory had never shown me kindness, I had believed his tolerance stemmed from simple discomfort with my disability. To learn it had been calculation all along. A soft vibration through the ground alerted me before Dominic tensed. Thorn returned, his expression grave as he spoke rapidly to Dominic. Though I couldn't hear the words, the urgency was clear in taut body language and quick gestures. "We're being followed," Dominic signed to me after Thorn finished his report. "A large group, at least 15 wolves, moving fast." Fear clutched at my throat. "Rogues?" "Some rogues, yes, but also others." His eyes met mine, their blue depths hardened with resolve. "Serena's followers, I suspect. And perhaps some of Gregory's wolves as well. An alliance against us. Against me." The reality of my situation crashed over me like an icy wave. I was being hunted by wolves from 3 different factions, all united in their determination to either control or destroy what I represented. "What do we do?" I signed, fighting to keep my hands steady. "We keep moving north," Dominic replied without hesitation. "My territory begins beyond the ridge, another 3 hours' journey. Once we cross that boundary, we'll have additional protection. I've already sent word ahead. More of my pack will meet us at the border." Thorn leaned in, saying something that made Dominic's jaw tighten. After a brief exchange, Dominic turned back to me. "The group is spreading out, attempting to surround us. We need to change course." He studied me for a moment, concern evident in his gaze. "Can you continue at this pace? Your wound?" "I can keep going," I signed firmly, ignoring the fire in my shoulder and the exhaustion creeping through my limbs. "I won't slow you down. Something like admiration flickered across his face. "I never thought you would." We set off again, angling west toward rougher terrain where our scent would be harder to track across stone and running water. The moon climbed higher, its light intensifying as if focused specifically upon us. My pendant grew warmer against my skin with each passing hour, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The forest gradually thinned as we climbed higher, the trees becoming stunted and twisted by constant wind. Boulders jutted from the earth like the bones of ancient creatures, creating a labyrinth of stone we navigated in tense silence. Every shadow seemed to harbor a threat. Every rustle of leaves sent fresh adrenaline coursing through my veins. As we crested a particularly steep incline, Dominic suddenly stopped, holding up his hand in a signal to halt. Thorn froze beside him, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. I couldn't hear what had alerted them, but I felt it. A shift in the air pressure, a subtle vibration through the soles of my boots. Something was very wrong. Dominic turned to me, his movements unnaturally still. He signed quickly. "They've circled ahead of us. We're being herded." Cold dread pooled in my stomach. "How many?" "Too many." His expression was grim. "They've anticipated our route too perfectly. Someone is tracking us specifically." The pendant. The realization hit me with stunning clarity. The moonstone. What if it's not just a conduit? What if they can somehow sense its energy? Use it to find me? Dominic's eyes widened slightly, his gaze dropping to the silver crescent at my throat. It's possible. The moonstones are ancient magic, their full properties lost to time. His hands paused, then formed a question that struck me as odd given our circumstances. "What does it feel like right now? The pendant?" I touched it reflexively, hot, pulsing, like it's trying to tell me something I can't understand. He nodded as if this confirmed a suspicion. "It's responding to threat, but also to potential. The old stories say that in moments of greatest danger, a moon speaker's abilities can manifest suddenly. A survival mechanism. That doesn't help us now," I signed, frustration bleeding through my movements. "I don't know how to access these supposed abilities." "Maybe you don't need to know," he countered, his signs deliberate. "Maybe you just need to stop fighting what's already happening." Before I could ask what he meant, a howl split the night, inaudible to me, but its effect on my companions was immediate. Thorn shifted partially, his features elongating, claws extending from his fingertips. Dominic remained in human form but dropped into a defensive stance, positioning himself between me and the sound. "They're coming," he signed tersely, "from all sides." "What do we do?" I asked, panic rising like floodwater. Instead of answering, Dominic took my face between his hands, his touch firm but gentle. The contact sent a jolt through me, like static electricity but deeper, resonating through bones and blood. His eyes bored into mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "Trust yourself," he mouthed clearly, ensuring I could read his lips. "Trust what you feel. The moon chose you, Everly. Let her speak through you." Then he released me and turned to face the approaching threat, his body already beginning the fluid transformation from man to wolf. Beside him, Thorn completed his shift, dropping to all fours as silver-gray fur rippled across his skin. I stood frozen, caught between terror and a strange building pressure behind my breastbone. Something unfamiliar yet oddly right, like a song remembered from childhood suddenly heard again. The pendant burned against my skin, no longer painful but insistent, demanding attention I didn't know how to give. They emerged from the shadows like nightmares made flesh, wolves of various sizes and colors, eyes gleaming with hunger or hatred or both. I counted 12 before they blurred into a mass of movement and threat. Dominic, now fully shifted into his massive black wolf form, launched himself at the nearest attackers, his power and grace terrifying to behold. Thorn fought at his side, the two of them creating a barrier of fury between me and those who sought to claim or kill me, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. For every wolf they drove back, 2 more pressed forward. Blood-darkened fur, splashed across stone. A piercing cry, high and pained, told me one of our defenders had been badly hurt. Helplessness crashed over me. What good was being a moon speaker if I could do nothing but watch as others fought and bled for me? The pendant pulsed hotter, almost burning now, its rhythm speeding to match my frantic heartbeat. In desperation, I closed my eyes, pressed my palm against the silver crescent, and did the only thing I could think of. I stopped fighting, stopped resisting the strange pressure building inside me, stopped telling myself this was impossible. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The world fell away, replaced by a sensation of floating, of expanding beyond the boundaries of my physical form. Though my eyes were closed, I could suddenly see in a way that transcended ordinary vision, perceiving energy rather than light, intention rather than movement. Every wolf on the ridge appeared as a distinct pattern of light and shadow, their essence laid bare before me. I saw Dominic's brilliant blue-white energy, steady and powerful as a mountain stream. Thorns beside him, amber and loyal. And our attackers, some burned red with hatred, others pulsed sickly green with greed or ambition. Among them, brightest and most malevolent, I recognized Serena's signature. Blood red shot through with black corruption. She hadn't shifted form, remaining in human shape at the periphery of the battle, directing others to do her dirty work. And beyond all these individual lights, I sensed something vast and ancient watching, waiting. A silver-white presence that enveloped everything like mist, conscious and deliberate in its attention. The moon. Not just the celestial body, but the consciousness, the deity, the force our people had worshipped since before written history. It spoke, not in words, but in pure understanding that unfurled within my mind like a banner of silver light. I saw patterns, connections, possibilities stretching across time. I saw my grandmother as a young woman, fleeing north with the pendant clutched to her breast, pregnant and terrified but determined. I saw Dominic as a child, receiving his own moonstone from his father's hands, accepting a legacy and a promise. And I saw what I needed to do now. I opened my eyes, the world snapping back into focus with startling clarity. Time seemed to have slowed, the battle before me reduced to a series of frozen tableaux. Dominic with jaws locked around a rogue's throat, Thorn bleeding from a gash along his flank but still fighting. Serena approaching from the side, a silver dagger clutched in her hand, her target clearly Dominic's unprotected back. Without conscious thought, I stepped forward and raised my hands. The pendant flared hot as a brand, and from my fingertips streamed ribbons of moonlight, tangible, physical, and undeniably real. They whipped through the air like living things, wrapping around our attackers, immobilizing some, flinging others away from Dominic and Thorn. Serena's scream of rage was so powerful I felt its vibration through the soles of my feet. She charged toward me, dagger raised, her face contorted into a mask of hatred. The moonlight responded to my instinctive fear, condensing into a shield before me. When her blade struck it, the silver metal shattered like glass, fragments scattering across stone. "Impossible," she mouthed, her shock evident even in the dim light. "You can't. This isn't..." But it was. Whatever power flowed through me now was ancient and undeniable, as natural as breathing once I stopped resisting it. The moonlight poured from my hands in ever-increasing streams, responding to my will with effortless precision. I directed it toward the remaining attackers, creating barriers that drove them back, careful not to harm but clear in my intent. They would not pass. One by one they retreated, some shifting back to human form in submission, others slinking away with tails tucked between their legs. Only Serena remained, her hatred seemingly immune to the display of power that had dispersed her followers. She circled me cautiously now, looking for weakness, for an opening. "The moonstone is wasted on you." She spat, her words clear on her lips. "You have no idea what true power is." In that moment, with moonlight streaming from my fingertips, an ancient knowledge unfurling in my mind, I felt an unexpected surge of pity for her. Serena had spent her life pursuing power she could never truly hold, convinced that authority came from dominance rather than connection. "This isn't power," I signed, the moonlight translating my gestures into glowing symbols that hung in the air between us. "It's responsibility, it's balance, it's serving something greater than yourself." Her face twisted with scorn. "Pretty words from someone who was nothing but a week ago. You think you can step into this role so easily? You know nothing of our politics, our struggles, our..." "I know suffering," I interrupted, the glowing symbols flaring brighter. "I know what it means to be powerless, to be dismissed, to be seen as less than. Perhaps that's exactly why the moon chose me. Something shifted in her expression. Fear finally penetrating the armor of her ambition. She took a step back, then another. "This isn't over," she mouthed, though the threat sounded hollow even without sound to carry it. "Yes," I replied simply. "It is." With a final glare of impotent rage, she turned and fled into the forest, leaving us alone on the moonlit ridge. The light streaming from my hands gradually dimmed as the immediate threat receded, though the pendant remained warm against my skin, a constant reminder of what had awakened within me. Dominic approached cautiously, having shifted back to human form. Blood streaked his chest and arms from wounds already beginning to heal, but his eyes shone with something I'd never seen directed at me before, respect mingled with awe. "I knew you were powerful," he signed, his movements reverent. "But that was—" He paused, seemingly at a loss for words. "Terrifying," I finished for him, my hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. "I don't know how I did it. It just happened." "You stopped fighting your nature," he replied simply. "You let the moon speak through you." Thorn limped over to join us, having also returned to human form. Though clearly injured, his expression held nothing but wonder as he looked at me. Dominic followed my concerned gaze to his friend's wounds. "He'll heal," he signed reassuringly. "We all will." He hesitated, then added, "Thanks to you." The magnitude of what had just occurred began to settle over me like a heavy cloak. I had channeled power beyond anything I'd believed possible. I had driven back more than a dozen wolves intent on killing or capturing me. I had, in the space of moments, stepped into a role I still barely understood. "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly aware of how utterly my life had changed in the course of a single night. Dominic's answer was immediate and certain. "Now we continue north. My territory awaits, your territory, soon enough." "Or, what do you mean?" A smile touched his lips, transforming his severe features into something unexpectedly gentle. "The Northern Territory has always been the traditional home of moon speakers. My people have been waiting for you, Everly. For generations, we've kept faith that the moon would send us her voice again." The responsibility implicit in his words terrified me almost more than the wolves who had just attacked us. To be welcomed not just as a refugee, but as something revered, something anticipated. "I'm not ready for this," I signed, the admission costing me more than I expected. "I don't know how to be what you need me to be." Dominic stepped closer, his presence simultaneously intimidating and comforting. "No one ever does at first," he signed, his movements gentle. "But you won't face it alone." The promise in those words, in his steady gaze, steadied something within me that had been trembling since the moment he'd first appeared in the forest. For the first time since my grandmother's death, I felt the possibility of belonging, of purpose, of a place where my differences might be valued, rather than merely tolerated. The moon bathed us in silver light, impossibly bright, as if concentrating its attention upon this single moment. The pendant at my throat hummed with contentment, warm and alive against my skin. "We should move," Thorn said, his words directed to Dominic, but his eyes still watching me with undisguised wonder. Dominic nodded, then turned back to me. "Are you able to continue?" he signed. "We're not far from the border now." I straightened, pushing aside exhaustion and the lingering shock of my awakened abilities. "Yes," I signed with newfound determination. "I'm ready." As we set off again, Dominic walked beside me rather than ahead, the subtle shift in positioning not lost on me. No longer simply a protector, now an equal, a partner in whatever lay ahead. The forest opened before us, bathed in moonlight that seemed to illuminate our path with deliberate clarity. For the first time in my life, the silence that had always separated me from others felt not like a barrier, but like a gift, a space in which I could hear what truly mattered. The Northern Territory unfolded before us like a realm from ancient legend. Dawn broke as we crossed the border, painting the landscape in shades of amber and rose gold. Unlike the densely forested Southern Territory I'd known all my life, the North was a study in dramatic contrasts. Vast evergreen forests giving way to rugged mountains, mist-shrouded valleys, and wide, rushing rivers. We were met at the border by a contingent of Dominic's wolves, 20 strong, arranged in a ceremonial formation rather than a defensive one. They bowed their heads as we approached, a gesture of respect I'd never received before. Their eyes lingered on the pendant at my throat, recognition and reverence mingling in their expressions. A tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair stepped forward, her bearing regal despite the simple clothing she wore. She pressed her fist to her heart in a formal salute to Dominic, then stunned me by making the same gesture toward me. "This is Helena, my most trusted advisor," Dominic signed, introducing her. "She has been keeper of the Moonspeaker histories since before I was born." Helena's hands moved in fluid, practiced sign. "We have waited many years for your return, Moonspeaker. The North has felt your absence keenly." The formality of the welcome disoriented me. Hours ago, I had been gathering mushrooms as the lowest-ranking member of my pack. Now I was being greeted as if my arrival fulfilled some ancient prophecy. The pendant warmed against my skin, as if confirming the rightness of this moment despite my misgivings. "I'm not sure I'm what you're expecting," I signed honestly. "I only just discovered what I am. I don't know how to be what you need." Helena's weathered face softened. "None of us know how to be what we are until we begin. The moon chose you, child. That is enough." We were escorted through territory so beautiful, it made my heart ache. Pack members appeared along the route, emerging from settlements and outposts to witness our passage. Many brought offerings, bundles of herbs, handcrafted tokens, small pouches that I later learned contained rare minerals believed to strengthen a Moonspeaker's connection to the celestial realm. By midday, we reached the heart of the Northern Territory, a settlement unlike any I'd seen before. While Southern packs lived in loose collections of cabins or in human-style houses, the Northern settlement was built in harmony with the landscape. Homes were partially embedded in hillsides, or constructed around living trees. Stone and wood structures followed the natural contours of the land, connected by winding paths and graceful bridges that spanned burbling streams. At the center stood a circular building crafted from pale stone that seemed to capture and amplify the sunlight. Its roof was open to the sky, with intricate carvings around the circumference that I would later learn depicted the history of Moonspeakers throughout the centuries. "The Moon Hall," Dominic signed, noting my fascinated gaze. "The spiritual center of our territory. It has stood empty, awaiting a Moonspeaker's return, for 50 years. The implications of that simple statement settled over me like a mantle of responsibility. An entire people had maintained faith, had preserved traditions, had waited patiently for someone like me to return. "Come," Helena signed, gesturing toward a path that wound up a gentle slope. "You need rest and healing before anything else. Questions and ceremonies can wait." We were led to a spacious dwelling built into the side of a hill overlooking the settlement. Inside, it was warm and welcoming, with polished wooden floors, comfortable furnishings, and large windows that filled the space with natural light. I was shown to a private chamber where a hot bath had already been prepared, fragrant with healing herbs that eased the lingering pain of my wounds. After bathing, I found fresh clothing laid out, simple but beautifully made garments of soft leather and woven fabric in shades of blue and silver. They fit perfectly, as if crafted specifically for me. As I dressed, I caught sight of myself in a burnished metal mirror, and barely recognized the woman who stared back. Still me, but somehow more defined, my presence more substantial. The pendant gleamed against my skin, seeming to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. A soft vibration through the floorboards alerted me to someone's approach. I opened the door to find Helena waiting patiently, her hands filled with what looked like medical supplies. "May I tend to your wounds?" she signed after setting the supplies down. "I've been a healer for 40 years, I nodded, touched by the offer. As she carefully removed my bandages and applied a fragrant salve to the claw marks on my shoulder, her experienced touch was gentle but thorough. "These are healing well," she signed when finished applying fresh bandages. "You have strong blood." "Blackthorn blood," I signed back, testing the words, the concept still new and somewhat surreal. Helena's eyes crinkled with a smile. "Yes, the strongest of the northern lines. Though your grandmother's departure was a great loss to us, perhaps it was the moon's design all along. You returned to us exactly when we needed you most." What do you mean? I asked, curiosity overriding fatigue. Her expression grew somber. The balance between territories grows unstable. Power struggles threaten the peace we've maintained for generations. Some, like Serena, believe strength alone should determine leadership. Others cling to ancient ways without understanding their purpose. She paused, studying me intently. The return of a moon speaker changes everything. You represent a third path, one guided by something higher than ambition or tradition. The responsibility implicit in her words settled heavily on my shoulders. I'm not sure I'm ready for this, I admitted. Everything has happened so fast. The greatest changes often do, Helena replied, her signs gentle. But you are not alone in this, Everly. The North has preserved the knowledge of moon speakers for generations. We will help you understand your gifts, your purpose. A different vibration through the floor. Heavier, more deliberate, signaled another visitor. Moments later, Dominic appeared in the doorway, freshly bathed and dressed, though fatigue still shadowed his eyes. The Council of Elders has requested an audience, he signed. I told them you needed rest, but they are insistent. They have waited 50 years, Helena signed with a hint of amusement. Patience has never been their strongest virtue. Despite my exhaustion, curiosity won out. I'll meet with them, I decided. Better to begin understanding my role here. Dominic looked simultaneously pleased and concerned. Are you certain? You've been through much in the past day. We all have, I signed, thinking of his own injuries sustained in my defense. Some things shouldn't wait. The moon hall was even more impressive up close. Intricate carvings decorated every surface. Wolves in various forms, phases of the moon, symbols I didn't yet understand, but somehow recognized on an instinctive level. As we entered through tall wooden doors inscribed with silver, I felt the pendant warm against my skin, responding to the ancient power contained within these walls. 7 elders awaited us, seated in a semicircle on curved stone benches. They rose as we entered, their expressions a mixture of hope, curiosity, and in one case, clear skepticism. Dominic took his place among them, indicating a stone seat positioned at the center of their arc, clearly meant for me. As I sat, sunlight streamed through the open roof directly onto the pendant, making it flare with sudden brilliance. A collective murmur ran through the elders, even the skeptical one looking momentarily awed. An elderly man with a face mapped by time leaned forward. I am Victor, eldest of the Northern Council, he signed. His hands gnarled but his movements precise. We have maintained the old ways, waiting for a moon speaker's return. Now that you are here, we must ask, what did the moon show you during your awakening? The directness of the question caught me off guard. I touched the pendant reflexively, remembering the flood of visions, the sense of ancient consciousness touching my own. Connections. I signed slowly, searching for words to describe an experience that transcended language. Patterns across time, my grandmother's flight, Dominic receiving his moonstone. I hesitated, then added, and threats, corruption spreading through the territories like poison. Victor nodded as if my answer confirmed something. The moon always shows what is needed most urgently. In your case, the danger that has been growing in your absence. The skeptical elder, a severe-looking woman with sharp features, leaned forward. How do we know she is truly a moon speaker? One display of power during a moment of crisis does not prove lineage. The pendant could be responding to her blackthorn blood, nothing more. Dominic's expression darkened, but before he could respond, I felt something stir within me, not anger, but certainty. The pendant warmed, and with it came that sense of expanded awareness I'd experienced on the ridge. Without conscious decision, I raised my hand, palm upward. Moonlight, impossible in the daytime yet undeniably real, gathered above my palm, forming a sphere of silvery radiance that illuminated the chamber with otherworldly light. Within it, images formed. The 7 territories surrounding the northern lands, each pulsing with a distinct energy. Dark tendrils of corruption spread through 3 of them, while 2 others shimmered with uncertainty. The eastern and western territories remain loyal to the old balance. I signed with my free hand. knowledge flowing through me from a source beyond my understanding. The southern river and mountain territories have been compromised by those who seek power without responsibility. The desert and forest territories waver, uncertain which path to follow. I met the skeptical elder's gaze directly. This is the truth as the moon sees it. Is this proof enough? Stunned silence fell over the council. Even Dominic looked shaken by the specificity of what I'd revealed. Information I couldn't possibly have known through ordinary means. The skeptical elder bowed her head, doubt replaced by cautious respect. I withdraw my question, Moon Speaker. The evidence speaks for itself. The sphere of moonlight dissipated as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving me lightheaded but strangely invigorated. Victor exchanged glances with the other elders, then signed with formal gravity. The moon has truly returned her voice to us. The question now becomes, what would you have us do with this knowledge? Moon Speaker. The weight of expectation in the room was palpable. They were looking to me for guidance, for decisions that would affect thousands of wolves across multiple territories. Me, who until yesterday had been gathering mushrooms on the forest floor, invisible and voiceless in my own pack. The absurdity of it might have overwhelmed me if not for the steady certainty emanating from the pendant, from something larger than myself that now flowed through me like a silver current. We need to heal the divisions, I signed, the words coming from someplace beyond my conscious thoughts. Not through force or political maneuvering, but by reminding all territories of what binds us together. The moon watches over all wolves equally. Her light falls on Alpha and Omega without distinction. Dominic's expression softened, something like wonder crossing his features. What do you propose, specifically? I closed my eyes briefly, listening to the silent voice that had guided me since the pendant first flared to life. When I opened them again, the path forward seemed suddenly, startlingly clear. A conclave of the 9, I signed. Not just alphas and their chosen representatives, but wolves from all ranks of each territory. A true gathering, as hasn't been seen in generations. The council stirred, exchanging glances that ranged from excitement to trepidation. Such a gathering would be unprecedented in modern times, an elder with silver-white hair signed. The logistics alone would be considerable, Dominic interrupted, but not impossible. The Northern Territory has space enough. And what of those who refuse to attend? Asked the formerly skeptical elder. Serena has likely already poisoned minds against this new moon speaker. I considered this, my fingers touching the pendant for reassurance. Those who refuse will reveal their true priorities, I signed with calm certainty. The moon's invitation cannot be compelled, only offered. Victor's weathered face creased in a smile. Wisdom already, from one so young and newly awakened. He turned to the other council members. I believe we should support this conclave. It is time for the territories to remember what unites us rather than what divides us. The discussion continued for another hour. Details and concerns raised and addressed. Throughout, I felt myself balancing between two states. The uncertain young woman still processing extraordinary changes, and something older, wiser, that spoke through me with increasing clarity. The pendant no longer burned against my skin, but maintained a steady, comforting warmth, like a hand clasped in mine. As the meeting concluded and the council dispersed, Dominic remained behind, his expression thoughtful as he studied me across the now empty chamber. You continue to surprise me, he signed when we were alone. Most new moon speakers take months to access the collective wisdom you've displayed today. It doesn't feel like my wisdom, I admitted. It feels borrowed, channeled from somewhere else. That's because it is, he replied, approaching slowly. The moon's voice speaks through you, but it's your ears that hear it, your hands that shape its message into action. That's the partnership of a true moon speaker. Not merely a conduit, but an interpreter. The distinction resonated deeply. And you? I asked, curiosity overriding caution. What is your role in all this? Something shifted in his ice-blue eyes. Vulnerability breaking through the Alpha's composure. Traditionally, the Alpha of the North serves as protector and partner to the moon speaker. In ancient times, they often formed a bonded pair, balanced halves of the leadership necessary to unite the territories. The implication sent heat rising to my cheeks. Bonded as in, Sometimes as mates, he signed, his movements uncharacteristically hesitant. Sometimes as sworn allies. The form of the bond varied, but its essence remained constant, strength and wisdom working in harmony. "And what form do you envision?" I asked boldly, surprising myself with the directness of the question. A smile touched his lips, transforming his severe features. "That depends entirely on what forms between us naturally, Everly. Bonds forced by tradition alone are brittle things. I would rather discover what the moon intends for us both." The answer pleased me more than I expected. "A wise approach for an alpha," I signed, matching his smile with my own. "I have my moments," he replied, humor warming his expression. "They've become more frequent since meeting you." We left the moon hall together, emerging into late afternoon sunlight that gilded the northern settlement in honey gold. Pack members stopped their activities to acknowledge us as we passed, their respect evident, but their greetings refreshingly genuine. Unlike the southern pack, where I'd been isolated and ignored, here I was seen, truly seen, for perhaps the first time in my life. Helena awaited us at the dwelling I'd been given, a knowing gleam in her eye as she noted our easy companionship. "The council appeared satisfied," she signed. "I take it they've accepted their moon speaker?" "They have," Dominic confirmed. "And she has already given them plenty to consider." "A conclave of the 9, I explained, watching Helena's eyebrows rise in surprise. "To begin healing the divisions between territories." "Bold," she signed after a moment's consideration, "but perhaps exactly what is needed." She glanced between Dominic and me, that knowing look returning. "You make a formidable pair already." Later that evening, as moonlight silvered the landscape outside my windows, I stood alone on a small balcony overlooking the settlement. Lights twinkled below as pack members went about their evening activities, their lives continuing while mine had transformed beyond recognition. I touched the pendant, now a comfortable presence against my skin, rather than the burning brand it had been during moments of danger. "Thank you, grandmother," I whispered in the privacy of my mind. "For protecting me until I was ready. For believing I would find my way here." A soft vibration through the stone floor alerted me to approaching footsteps. I turned to find Dominic at the threshold, respectfully awaiting acknowledgement before joining me. "May I?" he signed, gesturing to the space beside me. I nodded, oddly comforted by his presence. We stood in companionable silence for a time, watching the moon climb higher in the star-strewn sky. "Are you afraid?" he signed eventually, his question gentle rather than challenging. I considered this carefully. "Yes," I admitted, "but not in the way I once was." I touched the pendant, searching for words to express the transformation I was experiencing. Before, I feared rejection, isolation, never belonging anywhere. Now I fear failing those who need me, not being equal to the responsibility I've been given. I met his gaze directly. The fear feels different, cleaner somehow. Understanding softened his expression. That's the difference between fear that diminishes and fear that strengthens. One comes from doubt in yourself, the other from caring deeply about something beyond yourself. The insight struck me with its simple truth. "You're wiser than you appear, Alpha King," I signed, a teasing light in my movements. "And you're stronger than you know, Moon Speaker," he countered, his own signs carrying warmth that had nothing to do with formality and everything to do with the connection growing between us. We turned back to the view, standing close enough that I could feel the heat of his body beside mine. The moon bathed us both in silver light, blessing what was beginning to form between us. Not just the traditional bond between Alpha and Moon Speaker, but something uniquely our own, built on shared purpose and growing affection. In the weeks that followed, preparations for the conclave consumed much of our time. Messages were sent to all territories, formal invitations carried by trusted wolves. Some responses came swiftly. Eager acceptance from allies, cautious interest from neutral territories, pointed silence from those already aligned against us. Through it all, my abilities continued to develop under Helena's patient guidance. I learned to access the moon's wisdom without the urgency of crisis, to interpret the visions it sent with increasing clarity. The deaf Omega, who had once been relegated to gathering mushrooms, now stood in council with alphas, her voice, expressed through elegant signs and occasionally through moonlight itself, respected and heeded. Gregory arrived 3 days before the conclave was set to begin, his expression guarded as he was escorted into the moon hall, where Dominic and I awaited him. He seemed smaller somehow, less imposing than I remembered, or perhaps I was simply standing taller. "Alpha Gregory," I signed, my movements formal but not subservient. "Welcome to the Northern Territory." His eyes widened slightly at my transformed appearance, at the quiet confidence with which I now carried myself. "Everly?" he replied slowly so I could read his lips. "You appear well." "I am well," I confirmed. "Better than I have ever been." Discomfort flickered across his features. "I came to ensure the Southern voice is represented at this conclave of yours." "All territories are welcome," Dominic stated, his posture protective beside me though his tone remained diplomatic. "Provided they come in peace and with open minds." Gregory's gaze shifted between us, noting our unified front with a mixture of resignation and calculation. Things are changing rapidly between the territories, old alliances shifting, new possibilities emerging. "Yes," I signed simply. "That is why we called the conclave. To ensure these changes bring harmony rather than discord." Something like regret crossed his face. "I should have seen what you truly were. Perhaps things might have been different." The statement held no real apology, only the acknowledgement of a strategic miscalculation. Yet I felt no bitterness toward him, only a calm certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be, had followed the path that led me to my true purpose. "Things are as they were meant to be," I signed, the pendant warm against my skin in silent confirmation. The day of the conclave dawned clear and bright, the autumn air crisp with promise. Wolves from all 9 territories filled the great meadow below the moon hall. Alphas and betas, warriors and healers, elders and adolescents just coming into their strength. Even omegas like Maya, who had traveled north with several others from my former pack, seeking connection with a moon speaker who understood their experiences. Standing at Dominic's side on a natural stone platform overlooking the gathering, I felt a momentary wave of doubt. How could I possibly unite so many different perspectives, heal divisions that had festered for generations? As if sensing my uncertainty, Dominic's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own in a gesture that went beyond protocol into something more personal, more profound. I glanced up to find his ice-blue eyes steady on mine, faith and something warmer shining in their depths. "Together," he signed with his free hand, the simple word carrying layers of meaning. The pendant at my throat pulsed once, filling me with calm certainty. I squeezed Dominic's hand in response, then stepped forward to address the assembled territories. Moonlight gathered around my hands as I signed, my movements amplified by silver radiance that ensured even those at the furthest edges of the meadow could see my words. Behind me, Dominic translated for those who couldn't understand sign. Our voices, one silent, one spoken, unified in purpose. "I stand before you not just as a moon speaker, but as one who knows what it means to be unseen, unheard, relegated to the margins," I began, honesty forming the foundation of my address. "I know the pain of existing in a world that values only certain kinds of strength, certain ways of being." The silver light brightened, responding to the truth in my words, to the emotion behind them. "But I also know that strength takes many forms. That leadership means serving something greater than yourself. That true power comes not from dominating others, but from lifting them up." My hands formed the signs with growing confidence, the moonlight following their path like a visual echo. The moon shines on all of us equally, Alpha and Omega, north and south, old and young. Her light reveals a single truth. We are strongest when united, when every voice is valued, when every gift is recognized. Throughout the meadow, wolves of all ranks exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement, others looking thoughtful or surprised. Even Serena, standing stiffly among a small contingent of supporters, seemed unable to dismiss the resonance of the message. This conclave marks not a return to the past, but a step toward a future where tradition and innovation balance each other, where power and wisdom walk hand in hand. where no wolf is considered lesser, because their strengths differ from what is expected. The pendant flared with sudden brilliance, and with it came that expanded awareness I now recognized as the moon's direct influence. My hands continued moving, but the words they formed came from somewhere beyond my own understanding, ancient and new simultaneously, wisdom channeled through my unique perspective. The time of isolated territories must end. The moon calls us to form a true union, 9 territories, 1 people, bound by respect for diversity rather than fear of difference. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, a mixture of excitement and trepidation. What I proposed was revolutionary, not merely a political alliance, but a fundamental shift in how our society functioned. This will not happen in a day or a month, or even a year, I acknowledged, reading the uncertainty in many faces. But it begins now, with each of us opening ourselves to new possibilities, to voices we have previously ignored, to strengths we have failed to recognize. As I completed my address, silence fell over the meadow, not the tense quiet of suppressed disagreement, but the profound stillness that comes when truth resonates too deeply for immediate response. Then, starting slowly but building like a wave, wolves throughout the gathering pressed their fists to their hearts, the ancient gesture of respect traditionally reserved for alphas, now offered to a once-deaf omega who spoke with the moon's voice. Dominic stepped forward to stand beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. When he took my hand again, raising it in a gesture of unity, the pendant at my throat flared once more in approval. In that moment, looking out over wolves from all territories united in a single purpose, I finally understood what my grandmother had meant about finding my true path. The whispers of the moon had indeed come to me differently, not through my ears, but through my soul, teaching me to hear what truly mattered. I was Everly, once deaf Omega, now moon speaker, partner to an alpha who valued wisdom alongside strength, voice for those who had been voiceless, bridge between worlds that had grown too separate, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged.